News Talk 550 KFYI, the ongoing coverage of the elections, the entire ballot, not just what's happening on the top, not just what's happening in Washington and the yahoos that are doing that, but we're covering all the different elections. And so joining me in studio right now is the challenger to Sheriff Joe Arpaio. This is Paul Penzone in studio with me right now. And Mr. Penzone, thank you so much for making time to join us here in studio.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Please, Paul. No formalities.
Okay, good. We'll do that. Then, Paul, tell me this. You've run before. You're running again. Why is it that you think, I'll let you just get your opening statement here. Why is it you think you're the guy that can be the most effective sheriff for Maricopa County going forward here?
Well, truth be told, I think there's a lot of good men and women in law enforcement that would do an exceptional job. I felt it was necessary for me to step up and finish where I started because I'd like to see law enforcement represent its greatest attributes, which is about selfless service, staying solely focused on the safety of our community and making sure that we're disciplined and principled, which means you can't waste taxpayer dollars, you cannot be neglectful with investigations, and you can't make it about yourself. You always make it about the people you serve.
So we've seen Sheriff Joe, and one of the criticisms of him has been that he is very accessible by the media. I'll say it that way. I'll try to be as respectful as I can here. But there is a balance, isn't there? When you're the sheriff, when you're the guy in charge, don't you have to balance that with outreach to the community, to conversations with media, at the same time not appearing as though you're looking for a camera?
Absolutely. I had experience on the tail end of my career, and what most people don't realize is I worked in investigations. I worked undercover in narcotics. I worked on a federal task force with DEA. So my background was that meat and potatoes law enforcement type work before I went to silent witness. I just feel that law enforcement, when you're communicating with the public, it should be either one, you're trying to educate folks on how to be safer in their community. Two, you're asking for help to solve crimes, to address issues. And three is you're answering to law enforcement issues, whether it be why you took a particular action or if you fell short in your responsibilities and what you're going to do to correct it. But when it gets beyond that scope and it starts to be about selfish intent, just being getting notoriety for your own benefit, then I think you've left that lane of being a public servant and you're more invested in politics, which should never be acceptable in a law enforcement environment.
Of course, we say that, but at the same time, it is a partisan election that you're running in here. So there has to be some political aspect, doesn't there?
Yeah, but my question would be, why is it partisan? And I recognize I'm running on a ticket. I'm running attached to a party as the sheriff. But in law enforcement, there shouldn't be political implications. When someone shows up at your door, doesn't matter what color their uniform is or who they are as a person. It matters that they're going to be responsible, ethical, and principled when they enforce the law or however they deal with that issue. Politics has no place. And if I were to ask listeners, if you were to name 5 police chiefs in the Valley, could you even name 5 police chiefs who are exceptional law enforcement professionals? But secondarily, would you even know what their political affiliation is? Because we shouldn't, and it shouldn't have influence. So
if you're elected, are you saying that there really is there wouldn't be any change as far as the approach goes to law enforcement or to structure that would be politically based in any way?
No, I will not allow for political influences to impact how we're doing our business. I would tell you that I will be disciplined and very structured as far as administering and applying the law. We have to enforce the law, and we have to make sure this community is safe. We have to abide by the law in the same manner that we enforce the law. And decisions should never be made because of political opposition, because of certain influences that seem to garner support for your office. It should be, I serve the public. My decisions are based for their best needs.
Paul Penzone is running for sheriff in Maricopa County, joining me now on News Talk 550 KFYI. Tell me then about what you would change within the sheriff's office if you're elected, and then what wouldn't you? What things would you carry over?
Well, I'd like to see a greater influence in prioritizing the 3 core aspects of the sheriff's office, which is running the detention centers. They must be efficient. They must be safe. And when I say safe, I'm talking as much for the detention officers as I am for those that we house, because we have a responsibility to ensure their safety. Secondarily, we are responsible for transportation and security in the courts. And a lot of folks don't realize there's some fundamental responsibilities. We have to make sure that inmates get to court on time so that the court process can be fluid, as much for the judges and for the attorneys and others in that process. And then the third part is the unincorporated areas, those that do not have municipal law enforcement and require services. So from patrol to investigators to supplemental services such as civilian support or crime scene processing, all those factors have to be fundamentally sound and comprehensive so that we can be effective in what we do. But the one area, if I can just close with this, Chris, the sheriff's office has to be a conduit. It has to be a facilitator for the other agencies to their benefit so that they can be more effective and efficient. So restoring those relationships, not only at the top levels, but all the way through the organization so that we're more cohesive, would benefit everyone who lives in this community.
So what is being done right? What is it that you would carry over? Or what do you see that you would say, hey, this is great, let's continue to work with this?
That's a great question because I get asked this often. Let's talk about the MASH unit, which is very popular, and it has a great value because my opponent has tried to send this message out there that I don't support it, which is untruthful. I was actually the lead of Silent Witness when we were the first organization to offer crime rewards for crimes against animals. So I think there's a great value, first of all, in being aggressive in investigating those crimes because those are violent criminals who pose a threat to the safety of our families. Additionally, I think there's some benefit to caring for the animal community and utilizing that resource as one where you can teach compassion and responsibility to inmates who have the willingness to learn that attribute. That's important. We need to grow it, though. We need to call on people who are experts in the field of caring for animals to make sure there's a better partnership. We talk about tent city. I look at tent city like a business decision. We have to find the best way to house inmates, the most efficient and effective and safe way to do so. If the population is down so much that tent city is no longer necessary, then we'll evaluate and determine if it should stay as a part of the detention facilities. If not, I have to make decisions that are best for saving dollars. And here's what bothers me. Right now, I understand that the population is about 8,000. It can house as many as 11,000. The sheriff reallocated about, I think it was like $3 million of money that was set aside for raises for the detention officers in order to keep Tent City open. If that was a decision made solely for his benefit, it was the wrong decision because those men and women in uniform deserve not only respect, but they need to come to work in a place where the morale is high because they know that they're cared for. And if that decision wasn't made for the right reasons, then it needs to be changed.
So people would say, Paul Penzone, you're talking about making Tent City a business decision, but it is a crime prevention tool that we have. It is a major deterrent, the greatest deterrent we have. I have a number of people that will call the program. They'll tell me stories of people that they've hired that have gone back to Tent City at night or that have come out of Tent City and they said these are some really great employees. It really changed them. So if you were to take a look at Tent City and say this is a business decision and it has been handled appropriately, how do you get the same effects as a deterrent if Tent City's not there?
So I think we owe it to be responsible in that research because it can't just be the opinions of some, because some folks would tell you they'd rather be in Tent City outside than be isolated in a cell because the isolation would actually be harder on them and more of a deterrent. So if we're going to make a decision based off the impact the detention center has on future behavior, then we need to call on people who are truly experts in that field and do some research. What we can have, and what I'm saying is, say that was the case, then the decision becomes what is the most effective way to detain inmates safely, but to have an impact so that the recidivism rate drops. If that's the case, then again, it is why are we housing inmates across a broader space and detention officers getting overtime to their detriment where they're worn out and it's unsafe for them as opposed to consolidating our services. So we have to make sure that the people who understand best are doing research, giving us solid counsel before we make these decisions. But I have to say this, we have paid money out in lawsuits due to the conditions in Tent City. So those things have to be corrected because detention is the punitive element. It's not abuse or neglect. And as a society, we have to understand and recognize that.
For some, I suppose that line's a little different, isn't it? I mean,
I'm sure it is.
I talk to people all the time. They go, that's not abuse. When I was growing up, I worked in the oil fields of Texas.
I'm not saying be soft. I'm not saying be easy because that's not the case. It shouldn't be that when you go to a detention center, it's better than staying at the Ritz-Carlton. Detention is going to be uncomfortable, but it should not be abusive, and let's not confuse the two. So, no, I'm not soft on criminals or crime, nor would I ever be. But at the same time, I'm going to be humane and work within the parameters of the law to make sure that we are running the facility in a professional manner.
Paul Penzone is running for the sheriff's position here in Maricopa County and running against a guy who's been there since 1992. I mean, this is an uphill climb. Of course, this is a time that Sheriff Joe has caught an awful lot of political shrapnel from some of the things that have gone on. Of course, the charges brought against him from the Justice Department. And so I guess the question that I have then for you is, for many people in Maricopa County, and the polling numbers, the latest one has shown that you've got a pretty significant lead, a lead that normally Sheriff Joe is accustomed to. So this election for some is a referendum on his job.
Sure.
As of late. How do you continue to get your message out then, or what is that message, I suppose, that says to people, listen, I understand you're frustrated with the status quo, but listen, not only am I an alternative, I'm a better alternative.
Yeah, it is. What I ask of folks is this. Do your homework. When you go to vote, your vote is power. It is your voice. And oftentimes we become attached to individuals because we find a connection, whether it be how they present themselves or how they speak. And with the sheriff, he's benefited quite a bit from that. Not that he hasn't done good things for the community early on, but people are attached to him as a person. And at some point in time, you have to ask yourself, when it comes to the execution of the responsibilities, when it comes to being competent, where are we going forward? So I would just ask that they go to my website at penzone2016.com and take a look at what I've done during my law enforcement career if you're unfamiliar with it. Because I have worked in all different capacities. I've been extremely effective because I have surrounded myself with good men and women who are focused on accomplishing good things on behalf of this community. And I've held people accountable and been accountable myself. So when you look at it, we all have to recognize every organization, whether it's a law enforcement or otherwise, there will be a transition, there will be a succession. And that time has come. It's time for us to move forward, and I just want you to have trust and confidence in who I am and what I stand for.
Paul Penzone running for the sheriff, Maricopa County. We'll continue here talking a little bit about that accountability and what has been probably the nastiest in its race. Paul, we can't turn the television on without seeing the ads. And the ads were enough that it had garnered a response from you saying, knock it off. It's just not the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So talk to me about the ads. The ads that Sheriff Joe's been running, you say are defaming.
Absolutely, and it's called false light, where you're taking a little bit of information that turns out to be untruthful when you put all the information out there, and he's misrepresenting it. But so 13 years ago, this incident occurred. Since that time, it's been vetted more times than I can count. Okay, the city of Glendale. And I was a reporting person, but the city of Glendale investigated, the police department, as did the Phoenix PD, as the prosecutor's office, and then I went in front of a judge at my request regarding the orders which were dismissed. Every news station in this valley, I gave them the police reports and the affidavits in 2012.
Right.
And they all vetted them and said, there's no truth to this. This was not as portrayed by the sheriff. This time around, my former wife, my ex-wife, the mother of my son, gave a sworn affidavit saying that never happened. It was untruthful, what is being alleged, and the sheriff's using it for his gain. So why is he spending $3 million or whatever it is to put that out there over and over and over again? And again, it's not just point out the fact that it was dishonest and misrepresented the truth and alleged things that were untruthful. He went as far as to leave my social security number and birth date on the commercial, which is just an act of malice. When you're trying to tell a lie, you scream it from the rooftops, and that's what the sheriff's been doing. But the truth finds its way through all of that noise. And the truth is what it always was, which is his commercial is a lie, and I never did anything remotely close to what he's trying to allege. But that's all he has right now, because if we talk about his record, it's like distraction. If we're talking about his record, such as $150 million in lawsuits, being found in contempt for admitting that you lied to the judge and you didn't follow the judge's orders, pending criminal charges, cases that weren't properly investigated, racial profiling. If he keeps screaming about this, which is a lie about me, we're not talking about those issues, which is what affects the safety of our community. How about, what was it, $120,000 given to an informant for zero information from a person who brags about being in law enforcement for 55 years and working DEA? You never give out money before you have something of value when you're working with an informant.
This is a little bit of a tangent here. That happens in all lines of work. I don't know if you've seen, we're still paying Chandler Catanzaro, the kicker for the Cardinals.
Why do you got to traumatize me right now, Chris?
Even though
we were talking about something that was light and soft. Right? Now you're getting dark on me. What's going on? Yeah, that was a tough one last night.
So, sometimes money gets spent and results just don't come out there.
That's a strong argument, my man. I don't know where to go from there.
Paul Penzone is joining me in the studio. The allegations were that you had an argument with your ex-wife in the 90s, I believe, right? Is that, or was it early?
It was 2003.
2003, okay.
Yeah.
So 13 years ago. And as you said, the paperwork just doesn't support the assertions that in fact, you were, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, because before you came in, I did the reading too. You reported this in the first place. You were the one that said, we need to get law enforcement here, right?
Yeah, to be transparent.
All right.
And so for anyone who wants to take a look at the documents yourself, that's what I recommend. We have a website, and forgive me, but it's called shamelessjoe.com, because what he's doing is shameless. And all the affidavits and documents are there for you to read and make your own decision. I'm not going to tell you what you should think. Read the documents and all the information when it occurred. Make your own decision. And I'm confident that when you see it, you'll know what the truth really is.
Okay. Now let's talk about some of these other things that we see from the sheriff's department right now, including the posse. Yeah. And we've got. This has become something that pops up in the news, once every couple of months, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
The posse definitely generates interest.
Yeah, and I think it has great value. Posse has been around for a long time, long before the sheriff, and it is that kind of conduit bridge between the community and law enforcement, and it can be a great resource because there are men and women who want to be a part of keeping the community safe. So in my vision, it grows tremendously. As a matter of fact, I want to see young men and women, diverse throughout the community, becoming a part of that process. And what we'll do fundamentally sound, sophisticated training to make sure that they're equipped to go out there and do things. But you know where I'd like to utilize them? I'd love to see them go and talk to parents or in the schools about drug prevention. Right now, heroin addiction is up 1,000%. Heroin and Oxycontin have become the two greatest threats to the safety of our children and their health. I'd love to see them do training on gun safety. And I'm not talking about, opposing the Second Amendment. I'm saying if you're going to be a gun owner, understand how to make sure you're safe and responsible with it. How about just home safety, your personal safety? Going out there and do those types of things. Being a resource for other agencies with their permission, that if you had a crime scene right now, instead of seeing 3 or 4 officers on the perimeter holding that crime scene, we could have a response team of posse members who go out and relieve them so those officers can go back into service. In Maryville, there's a serial killer right now. It'd be great if posse members, with, again, the permission of that law enforcement agency, in this case it's Phoenix, going out there and passing out information on safety tips or how to report anything that is of concern for you that might lead to catching that person. So the posse will grow, and they'll be in a position to do amazing things in support of law enforcement within a parameter where it best suits the needs for us.
Is there any concern for you, for one, and I know you talk about the training and things of that sort, is there any concern for you about the safety of the posse members themselves? And I ask this because maybe you saw the news over the weekend here, but we had a ride-along in California where suddenly they're following a car, they're doing a traffic stop, and the car starts shooting at the officer, and of course the individual is part of the ride-along. And the first thing I thought of was, my goodness, we've got volunteers with the sheriff's department here. Does that ever cross your mind? It
absolutely does, because the liability attached to that responsibility is tremendous. And I'm not saying this to insult those posse members who have gone through training and that are armed. But let's be honest, law enforcement professionals go through hundreds, if not thousands of hours of training before they're actually equipped and qualified to be out on the street on a regular basis. So if we think that just by equipping someone and putting them through a small window of training and putting them in the seat next to the deputy makes it safer, it may or may not. So before we make those decisions, again, I go back to let's be responsible. Let's make sure that if we're supplementing operational things on the street with law enforcement professionals, that those that are supplementing it with them truly meet the standard where we feel confident and comfortable they can handle the liability.
So that's the other side of this, of course, is not only the concern that I have for the posse members themselves, but then, of course, we've all met that guy.
Yeah.
That guy that puts on his cowboy boots, and now that he's got a 9 strapped to his belt, boy, he's out there and he's going to enforce the law. And that worries me too, as a member of the community. I worry about that goofy guy out there.
I respect the men and women who want to be part of the posse because they want to contribute in that capacity. I also respect the fact that our community wants to know that law enforcement professionals that are given the authority and the powers they're given are best equipped to apply that authority. And there should be a minimum standard, and that standard is exceptionally high. It's not something that we take for granted, that we should look at lightly. We have to be serious about it, because what do we see across the nation when we have an incident where someone has exceeded their authority? The entire community becomes disrupted because of it, and those mistakes will happen. It's a very difficult job, but we have to be cautious, and we have to respect the amount of power that comes with this responsibility.
Paul Penzone is running for sheriff of Maricopa County, and I got to ask you this too. It has been really what our sitting sheriff has hung his hat on here is immigration enforcement. Now, the argument goes as to whether or not he has the authority to do some of this sort of thing. Where do you stand on this? Is there a position for the sheriff's department to work with, customs or whomever, or is that something that is better left to the federal government?
Well, I think it's the application that we've seen from the sheriff's office that has been troubling, because if you look at other agencies, they have worked cohesively within the rule of law on how they're applying the immigration issue. So the federal government has to own this responsibility. They can't pass that burden down, and that responsibility means, yes, we have to have secure borders. So I do not feel the other way. I do not feel that open borders is an option. We have to have secure borders. Anyone coming in our nation, we need to know who they are, why they're here. And as a guest, as a person pursuing job opportunity or citizenship, we know who you are and why you're here. When it comes to those in violation of the law, we have a responsibility to apply the law as it's written. The federal government has to own that responsibility, and then within the scope of what we do, which means investigating crimes on the street within our community, when we engage those who are in the country undocumented or illegally, we have to pass that information on to those who are responsible and hold the authority. But what we can't do is make it so that the political benefit by focusing solely on that comes to the detriment of hundreds of children because we don't have the resources to investigate those crimes properly. So no, I'm not going to be a person who says it's okay for us to just open up the borders and say anyone can come and spend as much time as they want here. We need to know why you're here, what your intentions are, and we need to be respectful to where we are as a nation. And I want to touch on this because I don't want to mislead anyone. There are young men and women who came here at a very early age and others who came into the country, and I do believe they should have a chance at citizenship because they know no other land. They know no other country. They were raised here, and they have proven their worth. So creating a more fluid and opportunistic way to earn citizenship, but again, earn it because it has great value when it's earned, and when it's given, it loses it, diminishes it. We have to appreciate and embrace that. But at the same time, we have to recognize there are those who don't deserve to be here, who maybe have committed crimes and have had other offenses where deportation is the ultimate outcome.
And obviously, as a sheriff, that would be your prime responsibility is tracking down those bad hombres.
Well, I'm going to stay away from that, my friend. I think we treat everyone with respect, and we should never. I've been confused for a lot of things. I'm of Italian descent, but I've been confused of many other ethnicities, and I think that's wonderful. That I'm attached to other cultures. I would never want to be treated in a way because of the color of my skin that means it's okay to stop me. And I come from a very diverse family. Okay, I have people within my family, all different races and religions and ethnicities. I want them to be treated with respect and dignity. I want the law to be applied when appropriate. We can't confuse the two. The ends doesn't justify the means. So if you're going to violate the law and say that, well, racial profiling is okay because the end justifies it, you're wrong. Unless you want to be the person who's treated in that capacity.
Paul Penzone running for sheriff, Maricopa County, up against the incumbent Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Latest polls show Paul with a significant lead. But the polls, as far as you go?
November 8th. That's the poll I'm worried about right there.
All right. Paul, thank you so much for your time. We'll look forward to it, and good luck in the race.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. It's been an honor.
We will continue to talk about what, of course, Paul said is a very serious issue. What the heck happened last night with Sunday Night Football? That's essential to the future of this state. That is next. It's Chris Merrill, News Talk 550 KFYI.